Come here. I'll show you what I've left of Shamia.
On the 24th of July, Magda's life changed forever. Her daughter, Stigma, a 42-year-old television presenter, was murdered by her husband, one of the capital's best-known judges. At the end of a high-profile trial in September, the man and his accomplice were sentenced to death. Stigma's mother still struggles to understand.
7 years of marriage, and that traitor killed her in the worst way imaginable. We're not talking about some ignorant nobody. No, he's a very powerful man who we never suspected.
A few days before her death, Stigma published this video on social media.
يعني الستات اللي بتتعرض لأي عنف اهربي بسرعة اهربي من اللي انت فيه اهربي وسيبي الجمل كله ما تفكريش دلوقتي في أي حاجة غير نفسك ما انت كده هتتقتلي.
According to a 2015 report from the United Nations, more than 5 million Egyptian women are victims of domestic violence every year. And yet, there are very few support systems in place to help them. At this NGO, social workers and lawyers have come together to help those in need. The organisation has worked with nearly 600 women so far this year and counting.
We help women who are victims of physical violence, and in many cases the husband is unemployed and takes drugs. He forces his wife to work and takes the majority of her salary. Many such women aren't prepared for work and find themselves being harassed and sometimes fall victims to sexual violence. They also suffer financial abuse with long working hours and meagre salaries.
As for the victims, they often prefer to remain silent.
I waited 3 years before getting a divorce. I was afraid of being judged as a divorcee, afraid of the way society would see me. In many Eastern cultures, lots of people think that a divorced woman shouldn't go out alone. They think poorly of you.
Such stigma is nothing new. At the end of the 1990s, President Mubarak himself took charge of the problem and came up with a slightly surprising solution: a village dedicated entirely to widowed and divorced women. After the death of her father 20 years ago, Nima Nagy and her mother were amongst the first arrivals in the village. Since then, Nima has lived a modest life.
The water isn't drinkable. We received jerry cans of water. When we arrived, there was no water, no electricity, or even other people. Today, thank God, it's not so bad, much better than it used to be.
But given the lack of infrastructure, the vast majority of divorced women return to their hometowns, leaving behind dozens of abandoned homes. Some of them have been sold. Saba El-Zouz and her husband bought this house 10 years ago.
The divorced woman came, stayed a while, and then they all went back home. So we took the opportunity to buy this land, but we have big problems with flooding. In some houses, there's water coming out of the ground and the levels are rising.
In the face of a deeply conservative society, Egyptian women still struggle to assert their rights. But thanks to social media, now their voices can be heard. In the summer of 2020, the Me Too wave crashed through Egypt. The following year, the government made harassment a crime, punishable by harsher penalties. At the time, the UN welcomed the change in the law. Now, the Egyptian press is picking up some of the stories of violence against women. Nadia Mabrouk was 3 years old when her uncles broke into her house and killed her mother, shooting her 8 times. Her crime? Marrying a Bedouin from a different tribe to her own. At the start of September, the young journalist published an article in which she told the story of this honour killing for the very first time.
I needed to write this article. I needed to speak, as I'd been silent for far too long. I want to say sorry to my mom, because I spent 32 years in fear of talking about her. And there were even times during all those years that I blamed her, that I thought it was all her fault.
The silence is ending and the feminist struggle is getting louder. At the end of March, a group of female MPs drafted a new bill to tackle violence against women. The proposals would ban child marriage and introduce prison sentences for perpetrators of domestic violence. If the road to freedom still seems long, then Egyptian women have at least decided to start walking.